My name is Tim Blumentritt, and this presentation covers corporate strategy. Corporate strategy focuses on the industries in which a firm competes. I place it in the external analysis section of this course because it dictates which environments will be important to the firm's decision-making. Most of this course focuses on business-level strategies, which examine how firms pursue success in a particular industry. Since almost all small and medium-sized enterprises compete in just one industry, business strategy is all they need. Even some very large firms, such as Target stores, are single industry firms. Corporate strategy, instead, examines firms that participate in more than one industry. Its objective is to understand decisions about the industries in which a firm should participate and then how those business units should interact with one another. Corporate strategy is largely used to expand the scale and scope of a firm. Let's start there. When a firm pursues growth and development, the simplest route is typically organic growth, which means capturing more market share or extending the firm's reach while staying within the bounds of its existing business parameters, perhaps as stated in its mission statement. Organic growth comes with incremental gains in scale and scope and greater levels of market penetration. When organic growth reaches its limits or just isn't fast enough for the firm's senior leaders, there are three general forms of growth accelerators available to them. They can seek to renew or expand their offerings, engage in partnerships to access new markets, capabilities, or product lines, and they can pursue merger and acquisition activities. If those expansion efforts lead to participation in more than one industry segment, the firm has moved into corporate strategy. Multi-business corporations are the result when these accelerators result in the operation of more than one strategic business unit. The next few slides add a bit of detail through these three sets of accelerators and how they may lead a firm to create multiple strategic business units. Strategic rejuvenations, or strategic renewals, occur when a firm makes major investments into creating new generations of its existing products or services. When these next-generation offerings are significantly distinct from the firm's current offerings, even while there still exists a market for the previous generation of products, the firm may create a separate SBU for the next generation products. For example, Ford created its Model E segment that is specifically dedicated to platforms and software for electric vehicles. Its traditional gas and hybrid cars are in its Ford Blue segment, and it has a segment for commercial vehicles. Strategic adjacencies occur when a firm builds extensions off of its current product and service lines in a way that moves the firm into new markets. These shifts are typically the result of using core competencies in new ways as opposed to creating new core competencies. Nike's entire history of growth can be interpreted through the lens of adjacencies. After launching as an importer of running shoes, it moved into manufacturing its own shoes, then to making basketball shoes, then to cleats for field sports like football, baseball, and soccer, and then on to clothing, sports equipment, and retail locations, among other extensions. Each of the moves was small in itself, but led to a much larger company with lots of different activities. Partnerships allow a firm to concentrate on its core activities while covering necessary tasks and participating in developmental endeavors. There are four general types of partnership arrangements available to firms. The most common type of partnerships are long-term contractual relationships, a step beyond regular market dealings. When a firm creates a partnership with another firm, it is signaling more stable and persistent relationship than a transactional relationship. Both sides can benefit as long as the costs and risks of tying up a single source relationship outweigh the flexibility of a market relationship. Examples include working with a firm for payroll processing, such as ADP, Paychex, or Gusto, and long-term relationships with an accounting firm, a law firm, and a marketing agency. In fact, these relationships can become so seamless that employees of a partner firm might even have permanent desks within the company's office space. Licensing arises when a firm owns something that has value in ways that it can't capture itself. For instance, major sports leagues license their team's logos and player jerseys to companies like Nike, which can make apparel and other items available for sale to fans. Disney licenses its intellectual property like the Star Wars franchise to companies who can use the characters and themes of those franchises in their own activities, like Hasbro, which makes toys based on the films. More permanent relationships arise when two partners share ownership positions. This can occur when one company invests sizable equity in its partner, tying the two together, or when two entities mutually provide equity to create a new organization called a joint venture. These harder-to-break tie-ups between organizations signal long-term intentions for the two companies to work closely together. The relationships become so inseparable that the resulting business activities can result in something that the partners could not have created on their own, such as new product or service offerings, new technologies or knowledge bases, or new market presences. An example of an equity alliance is Microsoft's investment into OpenAI. In 2022, Polaris, which makes gas-powered off-road vehicles and snowmobiles and Zero motorcycles, jointly created Revved Up to offer new off-road vehicles powered by electric motors. Mergers and acquisitions refer to the consolidation of two companies into a single company. A merger occurs with the integration of two approximately equal companies with goals of pursuing operational synergies, jointly expanding market reach, or mutually enhancing competitive advantages. In practice, there are very few deals that really can be called mergers, even when a deal is announced as such. An example, however, is the merger between SunTrust and BB&T, which were about the same size at the time of the transaction, to create Truist Bank. An acquisition involves one company purchasing another, either through buying its shares or assets, to control and integrate the target company into its operations. An example of an acquisition is Google's purchase of Wix, a firm targeted by Google to augment its cloud computing business. In either case, the process of completing a M&A deal is quite intensive and typically involves a number of stages, including target identification, due diligence, valuation, negotiation, and, in some cases, regulatory approval. The real challenges start after the deal is closed. The resulting firm has to integrate the target's operations into its own activities and meld different organizational structures, systems, and cultures into a functioning organization. There are two general rationales underlying M&A transactions or the underlying theses driving an acquiring entity to purchase a target firm. Let's start with entry into targeted industries. This is attractive to a firm that wants to expand into a particular product market segment, but doing so organically would take too much time or would involve brutal competition with industry incumbents. For instance, Microsoft acquired LinkedIn in 2016. To that point, Microsoft had very limited exposure to any type of social media business, meaning that adding LinkedIn helped it enter a new market. The second main type of strategic rationale for M&A arises when an acquiring firm purchases a target firm because its activities are so similar that the combined entity can be more efficient than the two independent companies. An example is Schwab's purchase of TD Ameritrade. This combination allowed the two firms to share back office and administrative functions, making the combined entity more efficient than the two companies could achieve on their own. M&A activity based on a financial rationale is no different than the reason an individual buys a particular stock. The acquirer thinks the target firm is worth more than its current price. In M&A, things get a bit more complicated because the acquirer buys the entire firm and takes control of its operations rather than just buying some shares. The acquiring entity will often make changes to the target's strategies or capital structure in pursuit of the additional value. Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter in 2022 is a great example of a financial purchase, even if the deal had some twists and turns. To summarize, all three of these types of accelerators are paths to growth and development beyond pure organic initiatives. Whether or not the initiatives are part of a firm's existing activities, making them part of business strategies, or extend the firm into new segments, making them corporate strategy, depends on their impact on a firm's scope and structure. If an accelerator creates growth that either deepens the firm's penetration of its existing markets or just allows it to pursue business in a more expensively defined industry, then it is a business strategy move. For instance, Nike didn't enter a new industry when it started selling basketball shoes. In addition to running shoes, it just expanded its pursuit of business in athletic footwear. However, if the accelerator extends a firm's activities to such an extent that organizing them into separate, dedicated business units, then the firm has become diversified and is now a corporation. Again, focusing on Nike, the launch of its retail stores were not just an incremental move like track shoes to basketball shoes. That initiative shifted Nike into an entirely different mode of operations, which would be called a corporate strategy initiative. I will now focus on the two fundamental questions in corporate strategy: in which industries should the firm compete, and how should the firm manage interactions among its business units. Answering the first question depends on the degree to which it wants to diversify. Generally, there are two options: related diversification and unrelated diversification. The difference between the two is analogous to the difference between developments in business strategy that focus on improving existing activities as opposed to building new capabilities through entrepreneurial efforts. Even if corporate strategy involves separate strategic business units, those units can be related to some degree or not related at all. There are two general forms of related diversification. Vertical diversification occurs when a firm builds a business in a sector up or downstream from an existing position in an industry's total value system. Amazon engaged in downstream diversification when it built its own warehouses and delivery systems to get packages to its customers, replacing its contracts with services such as UPS and the U.S. Mail. Netflix went upstream when it developed its own production studios to create movies and shows instead of relying solely on traditional Hollywood for all of its content. Product or service diversification occurs when a firm enters a new product category, often through creation of products or services that utilize elements of already successful offerings. Instead of up or down an industry total value system, this diversification moves the firm into new industries. Amazon's development of its web services category came about when it offered its computing power, which it had developed first to service its own online activities, to companies that needed cloud computing capacity. Netflix offers a range of video games to its streamers, in addition to movies and shows based on themes built off its existing content. In addition to the forms of diversification, an additional factor is the degree of diversification. Many firms participate in a very few different industries. For instance, both UPS and Home Depot have substantial operations selling services to corporate clients called HD Supply and UPS Global Logistics that may be unfamiliar to most people. Others get more expansive, such as Apple with its range of products, like phones and computers, all the way to services like Apple TV and iTunes. In unrelated diversification, the corporation acts more as an investor than an operator. This slide has a list of portfolio companies that comprise Berkshire Hathaway, the company run by Warren Buffett, probably the most famous investor of all time. He and his colleagues use Berkshire Hathaway as a means of making investments into firms that they believe are undervalued, allowing each unit to run independently. The previous few slides covered different types of diversification, all of which are related to the first of the two fundamental questions in corporate strategy: in which industries should we compete? I'll now move on to the second question of managing interactions among units. The answer to this question depends on the degree to which the different business units are related to one another. Consider three descriptors of interactions among a corporate's headquarters and its strategic business units. Integration mechanisms are the way that SBUs utilize the key characteristics of the overall corporation to improve the strategic performance of their particular business strategies. In sharing resources, more than one SBU draws upon a resource at the same time, such as the combined use of a sales force or customer interfaces. At FedEx or UPS retail locations and websites, you can ship packages, but you can also design and print posters and make copies. So while shipping and document management are two very different business activities, the customer interface with them is the same. Transferring resources is a bit easier to understand. It means that various SBUs can use a resource on their own terms. For instance, Apple sells a range of products like computers and laptops, devices like watches and headphones, and services like Apple TV and iCloud. While those are distinct business activities, all of them can utilize the Apple brand name, even if the offerings are pitched to different people with different value propositions. Firms with unrelated diversification do little of either sharing or transferring resources. The challenge with both sharing and transferring resources is that they require coordination, which may mean that a resource has to be controlled so that one SBU doesn't shift or dominate the resource in a way that harms the other SBUs. A key role of a corporation's headquarters is to manage interactions among SBUs. A larger, more influential home offices is required when the utilization of resources is highly coordinated. As a firm's SBUs are less related, smaller, more administrative home offices are appropriate. Last, there is a flip side to the accelerators, and that is divestitures, also known as spin-offs or breakups. Spin-offs occur when a business unit can be carved out from the parent organization and is worth more as an independent firm or as a target of an acquiring firm. Firms consider spin-offs if a unit is no longer part of its strategic vision or is underperforming. When this happens, the three most common moves are listed here. Of course, if a unit is truly failing, it can simply be closed. This is essentially declaring bankruptcy for that unit. To conclude, the easiest and cheapest path to development is organic growth or further developing the firm's existing resources, activities, and assets through its business strategies. The remaining options involve working with other firms. If other firms can provide specific contributions to a firm's activities, contractual arrangements are typically the answer. If two firms believe they can develop something interesting by working together over the long term, equity alliances come into play. And if a firm wants to make a big leap forward in terms of its market presence or its portfolio of resources, capabilities, or core competencies, it can acquire a target firm. On the other hand, firms can spin off units that are not part of its strategic vision or are simply failing. And that concludes this presentation.